All right, so today we are taking a deep dive into Structure Therapeutics Inc., or GPCR as they're known on the stock exchange.
Sounds intriguing.
It is, and our listeners are always on the lookout for promising investment opportunities. And this one, well, let's just say it's been generating some buzz.
I can see why. Their approach is pretty unique.
Exactly. And that's what we are going to unpack today.
Yeah.
Everything from their business model to their financials. We'll even touch upon a surprising connection this company has to a pharmaceutical giant. But you'll have to wait until the end for that reveal.
I love a good cliffhanger.
Don't worry, we'll get to that. But first, let's start with the basics. Structure Therapeutics is a biopharmaceutical company. Their focus is on creating oral, small molecule therapies.
Primarily for chronic diseases. Think obesity and related conditions.
Right, and this focus already sets them apart from many other players in the biopharmaceutical space.
Because they are steering away from those traditional large molecule therapies. The biologics, the peptides.
Right.
The ones that often require, injections.
So, no needles involved. That's good news for a lot of people, I'm sure. But for those of us who aren't scientists, can you explain why this is such a big deal? Why is a pill preferable to a shot, aside from the obvious ouch factor?
Well, for starters, think about manufacturing. Small molecule drugs, they are generally easier and cheaper to produce at scale. Then there's the whole patient convenience aspect. Popping a pill, it's way more manageable than having to deal with regular injections.
Makes sense.
And all of this can lead to lower costs overall, both for the company and for the patients.
So it's a win-win situation, potentially.
Potentially, yes. But it's not just about the delivery method. Structure Therapeutics is using some pretty cutting-edge tech to design these molecules.
Like what?
They leverage advanced structure-based drug discovery and computational chemistry. Basically, they're using powerful computer models to design these small molecules to interact in a very precise way with specific targets in the body.
Wow. So it's a very targeted approach, not just trial and error. Okay, so we've got the basic idea of what they do. Now let's get into their pipeline. What are some of the specific drugs they're developing that have analysts excited?
Their leading candidate right now is aleniglipron, also known as GSBR 1290. It's an oral GLP-1 receptor agonist. And it's been showing some very promising results in weight loss trials.
Okay, hold on. For the non-scientists in the audience, could you break down that term, GLP-1 receptor agonist?
Sure. GLP-1, it's a naturally occurring hormone that helps regulate blood sugar levels and appetite.
So it helps you feel full.
Exactly. What aleniglipron does is it mimics the effects of GLP-1, but it's taken orally as a pill instead of needing to be injected.
Ah, I see. So potentially the same benefits, but in a much easier to take form.
Precisely. And that's a big part of the excitement surrounding it.
I can see why. Aleniglipron sounds like it could be a real game changer.
Yeah.
But what else do they have in their pipeline?
They're also developing amylin receptor agonists.
Amylin receptor agonist.
Yeah, amylin. It's another hormone. Involved in appetite regulation and glucose control. It works in a slightly different way than GLP-1.
Interesting.
Their lead candidate in this area is ACCG2671. It could be used on its own or in combination with aleniglipron, for potentially even better results.
So they are targeting multiple pathways involved in these chronic conditions. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Because these are complex problems and probably require a multi-pronged approach, right?
You got it. Now, all of this innovation wouldn't mean much without a strong team leading the charge.
That's what I always say. A company is only as good as its leadership. So let's talk about the people behind Structure Therapeutics. Are they up to the task of navigating this complex world of pharmaceuticals?
From what I've seen, Structure Therapeutics has a highly experienced management team with a proven track record in the biopharmaceutical industry.
Let's hear some highlights then. Who are the key players and what makes them stand out?
At the top, you have CEO Raymond Stevens. He holds a PhD. Yeah. And he has deep expertise in molecular biology and chemistry.
Sounds like the perfect background for leading a company that's focused on drug discovery.
Absolutely. And his experience goes beyond just the science. He's successfully navigated the world of clinical trials, secured funding for promising drug candidates.
He's got the experience then.
He does. He also, interestingly enough, co-founded a company called Receptos. But we'll delve deeper into that little tidbit later.
Okay, now you've really got me curious. We'll definitely circle back to that later. But for now, it sounds like Structure Therapeutics has a captain who knows how to steer the ship. What about the rest of the crew? Are they up to par?
The entire management team is made up of seasoned professionals. Expertise in areas like GPCR biology, structure-based drug design, global drug development. This isn't a group of rookies. They've been in the trenches. They understand what it takes to bring a drug from the lab to the market.
That's reassuring to hear, especially in an industry as complex as pharmaceuticals. But let's be realistic. Experience alone doesn't guarantee success. You need money to make these dreams a reality. So let's talk about the financial side of things. What's the picture like for Structure Therapeutics?
Well, as you might expect from a clinical stage company, they're not generating revenue just yet. They're still in the heavy investment phase, pouring resources into research and development.
Right. Can't expect profits when you are still working on getting your products to market. Makes sense. But what about their overall financial health? Are they bleeding money, or do they have a solid foundation?
Well, their financials actually paint a pretty promising picture. They have a market capitalization of roughly $1.26 billion, which is a healthy indication of investor confidence. And here's the kicker. They currently have zero debt.
Wow, that's impressive.
Right. Not many companies, especially in the biotech world, can say that.
They can.
It speaks volumes about their financial prudence. And while they are experiencing negative cash flow right now, which is typical for companies heavily investing in R&D, they have a substantial cash runway, meaning they have enough funds to keep the lights on and continue their research without having to scramble for immediate financing.
So a debt-free balance sheet and a healthy cash runway. That sounds like a pretty solid financial footing for a company at this stage. It's a good sign that they are managing their resources responsibly.
It is. It is. And it definitely gives them more flexibility, lowers their risk profile compared to companies that are burdened with debt. They're not under pressure to become profitable overnight, which allows them to really focus on the long game of developing their pipeline and bringing those potentially game-changing therapies to market.
So we've covered their innovative business model, their experienced leadership team, and their surprisingly solid financial standing. It's shaping up to be an interesting story, but we've only just scratched the surface.
There's much more to uncover, from market sentiment and ownership structure to a full SWOT analysis, where we will assess their strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats.
And of course, we can't forget about that intriguing connection to a major pharmaceutical player that you teased earlier. But for that, you'll have to stick around for the grand reveal in part 3 of our deep dive.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Structure Therapeutics.
So far, we've uncovered some fascinating insights about this company, like their focus on those oral small molecule therapies, which, as we discussed, could really be a game changer in terms of accessibility and cost effectiveness. And let's not forget about that debt-free balance sheet, which is pretty impressive for a company at this stage in its development.
It definitely sets them apart, no question about it. But let's shift gears a bit now and talk about how the market is perceiving Structure Therapeutics. What's the overall sentiment?
Yeah, because investor sentiment can really make or break a company, especially in the world of biotech, which we know can be pretty volatile. So what's the buzz like on the street? Are investors excited about Structure Therapeutics, or are they approaching with caution? What have you heard?
I'd say it's a bit of a mixed bag at the moment, which isn't unusual for a clinical stage company.
Right.
Analyst price targets for GPCR, they range from a conservative $50 a share to a very optimistic $118.
Wow, that's quite a spread. What's driving those wildly different projections?
Well, a lot hinges on the success of their clinical trials,
Right.
particularly for their lead drug candidate, eleniglipron.
Right, the oral GLP-1 receptor agonist.
Exactly. Remember, this is the one that's showing potential as a weight loss treatment. If the upcoming phase 3 trials yield positive results, it could be a huge catalyst for the stock price.
So it's a bit of a make or break moment for them then. Big rewards if it works, significant risks if it doesn't.
Exactly. And we also can't forget about the competitive landscape. Structure Therapeutics isn't alone in this race.
Yeah.
They are going up against some pretty established players like Novo Nordisk and Eli Lilly, who already have those injectable GLP-1 therapies on the market. And Pfizer, they are also developing an oral GLP-1, so the competition is fierce out there.
It sounds like Structure Therapeutics needs to not only prove their drug works, but also convince doctors and patients that their oral therapy is superior to the existing options.
You hit the nail on the head there. They need to demonstrate a clear advantage, whether it's in terms of efficacy, safety, convenience, or cost. It's a high-stakes game, for sure.
It certainly sounds like it. Okay, so we know market sentiment is heavily tied to those upcoming trial results and their ability to stand out in this very crowded market. Let's shift gears again and talk about who's holding the reins of this company. What can you tell us about the ownership structure of Structure Therapeutics? Who are the key players behind the scenes?
Well, one of the first things you'll notice when you look at Structure Therapeutics is the high level of institutional ownership, meaning that big institutions, like mutual funds, hedge funds, they have a significant stake in the company.
That's usually a pretty good sign, right? It suggests these institutional investors who have whole teams of analysts and a lot of experience evaluating companies see that long-term potential in Structure Therapeutics.
It's a good indicator, yeah. They're putting their money where their mouth is. They're betting on the company's success. We also see some moderate insider ownership, and there have been instances of insider buying, which again is generally viewed as a positive indicator. It suggests that those with inside knowledge about the company believe that the stock is currently undervalued.
So you've got both those big institutions and company insiders showing confidence. But you mentioned earlier that there's something unique about their ownership structure. What did you mean by that? What's the catch?
Well, the ownership is actually quite concentrated, meaning that a relatively small number of large institutions hold a majority of the shares.
Interesting.
And this can be a double-edged sword.
I'm intrigued. Break it down for us. What are the potential benefits and drawbacks of this kind of concentrated ownership structure?
Sure. So on the positive side, it can lead to greater alignment between those shareholders and management. Those large institutions, they have a vested interest in seeing the company succeed, and they can exert influence to ensure it stays on track. They're not just passive investors, they have a voice and can hold the management team accountable.
Right. They've got skin in the game, so they'll want to protect their investment and make sure the ship is steering in the right direction.
Right.
Makes sense. But what about the potential downsides? What should investors be wary of?
Well, the flip side is that concentrated ownership can sometimes raise concerns about potential conflicts of interest and, reduced accountability to smaller shareholders. If those few large institutions have differing agendas, or maybe they prioritize their own interests above those of the broader shareholder base, it could create problems down the line.
Ah, I see. So it's a bit of a balancing act then. The potential for strong leadership and alignment is there, but so is the risk of those large shareholders wielding a little bit too much power and potentially making decisions that don't benefit all investors equally.
Exactly. It's definitely an important factor to consider when evaluating Structure Therapeutics as a potential investment. Now, to get a more holistic view of the company's overall position, let's dive into a SWOT analysis.
Okay, I love a good SWOT analysis.
Okay.
Let's break it down. What are Structure Therapeutics' key strengths? What gives them an edge in this competitive market?
Well, their biggest strength, hands down, is that innovative oral small molecule platform we've been discussing. It offers all those potential advantages in terms of scalability, patient compliance, and cost effectiveness compared to those traditional large molecule therapies.
Right, right.
And these advantages could be a real game changer in the pharmaceutical world, particularly in a therapeutic area like obesity treatment, where patient adherence to long-term medications is crucial.
Absolutely. And they're also targeting a market with a huge unmet need. Obesity rates are climbing globally, and there's a growing demand for effective and accessible treatments. Plus, they have that experienced leadership team we talked about, which brings a wealth of knowledge and a proven track record to the table.
All good points. But let's not sugarcoat things. Every company has its weaknesses. What are some of the challenges that Structure Therapeutics needs to overcome?
Well, the most obvious one is that they're still pre-revenue.
Right.
They are burning through cash to fund all that research and development, and there's no guarantee those drugs will actually make it to market, let alone become blockbusters. They are also competing against some absolute giants in the pharmaceutical industry who have, massive resources and those established distribution networks.
All true. They definitely lack the brand recognition and marketing muscle of those big players, which could make it a bit harder for them to gain traction in the market, even if their therapies prove to be effective. And let's not forget about the inherent uncertainty of clinical trials.
Right, right.
Drug development is a risky business, and there's always a chance their lead candidates could stumble in those late-stage trials.
So, some significant hurdles there. But on the flip side, what are some of the potential opportunities that could propel Structure Therapeutics forward? Where could they see some growth and expansion?
Oh, there's definitely room for growth. For example, they could expand their pipeline beyond just those obesity treatments, explore other therapeutic areas where their oral small molecule platform could be advantageous. Think of chronic conditions like diabetes, cardiovascular disease, even certain types of cancers.
Right, their technology isn't limited to just one disease. They could potentially diversify their portfolio and target multiple markets.
Exactly. And they could also explore the development of combination therapies, which are becoming increasingly important in treating complex conditions. By combining their drugs with existing therapies, they could potentially enhance efficacy or reduce side effects.
And they could always leverage those strategic partnerships, right, to gain access to additional expertise, resources, or distribution channels. It's not always about going it alone. Collaboration can be a really powerful tool in the pharmaceutical world.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. But we can't ignore those threats lurking on the horizon. What are some of the external factors that could potentially jeopardize Structure Therapeutics' success? What are they up against?
Well, I think competition is the biggest one. As we already discussed, they are swimming in a pool with some very big sharks, and those companies aren't going to give up market share easily. Then, of course, there are those ever-present regulatory hurdles. Getting a new drug approved is a long and expensive process, and there's always that risk of delays or unexpected roadblocks popping up along the way.
Right, and we also can't forget about the scientific challenges. Developing those highly specific drugs with minimal side effects is no easy feat. The complexity of biological systems can sometimes throw a wrench into even the most promising research. So, a lot to consider, a lot of moving parts. It's clear that Structure Therapeutics is operating in a very dynamic and challenging environment, where both opportunities and risks are abundant.
It's a classic high-risk, high-reward scenario, that's for sure. But remember, we're not done yet. In the final part of our deep dive, we'll be revealing that surprising connection Structure Therapeutics has to a major player in the pharmaceutical industry. And we'll tie everything together, give you those insights you need to make an informed decision about this very intriguing company. Welcome back to the deep dive. We spent this episode really getting to know Structure Therapeutics, exploring their innovative approach to drug development, their surprisingly solid financial standing, and that very competitive landscape they are navigating. We've also taken a close look at their strengths and weaknesses, and now I'm sure our listeners are eager to hear about that promised reveal. The connection Structure Therapeutics has to a major pharmaceutical player.
It's time to connect the dots. Remember earlier when I mentioned that CEO Raymond Stevens? He co-founded a company called Receptos.
Right. Before he took the helm at Structure Therapeutics. So what's so special about Receptos? Fill us in.
Well, back in 2015, Receptos was acquired by none other than Bristol Myers Squibb.
Wow.
One of the biggest names in the pharmaceutical world.
That's a huge connection. It seems like Dr. Stevens has a real knack for building companies that attract the attention of big pharma.
It definitely adds another layer of intrigue to Structure Therapeutics' story. Clearly, Dr. Stevens knows how to navigate that complex world of drug development, build those successful teams, and ultimately create value that's recognized by those major players in the industry.
It's not a guarantee of future success for Structure Therapeutics, of course, but it definitely adds to their credibility. So, as we wrap up our deep dive today, what are some of the key takeaways you want our listeners to walk away with?
Well, I think it's safe to say that Structure Therapeutics is a company with a compelling story, and they have a lot of potential. But like with any clinical stage biotech company, there are some inherent risks involved. They are operating in a rapidly growing market, though, addressing a significant global health challenge. And they are doing it with a unique and potentially, as we've discussed, game-changing approach.
They've got that innovative oral small molecule platform, which offers all those advantages we talked about: accessibility, convenience, and cost effectiveness. And of course, they have a solid financial position, zero debt, which gives them a very strong foundation to build upon. Plus, they've got that seasoned leadership team. The people at the helm really know how to navigate the complexities of the pharmaceutical industry.
That said, they are still pre-revenue, and ultimately, their success hinges on the outcomes of those clinical trials and their ability to compete effectively against some very large and well-established players.
So it sounds like Structure Therapeutics is a company that investors should be watching closely. The potential's certainly there, but so are those challenges. Ultimately, the decision of whether or not to invest is a very personal one, based on your individual risk tolerance and investment goals.
Absolutely. We've done our best to equip you with the information and analysis you need to make an informed decision. But now it's up to you to do your own research, weigh the pros and cons, and decide if Structure Therapeutics is a company that you truly believe in.
And as always, we encourage our listeners to really explore the source materials that we've linked in the description and form their own opinions.
And if you're hungry for more in-depth analysis of companies like Structure Therapeutics, be sure to subscribe to the Stock Analytics AI YouTube channel. We're constantly using our expertise and those AI tools to uncover hidden gems and break down complex topics in the world of finance and biotech.
But before we sign off, a quick disclaimer. The information we've shared today is for educational purposes only, and it should not be considered financial advice. Remember, investing always carries risks, and it's essential to consult with a qualified financial advisor before making any investment decisions.
Right, and keep in mind we rely on a combination of research, data analysis, and those AI tools to bring you these deep dives. But even the most advanced AI can't predict the future with 100% certainty.
So do your own research, assess the risks, and invest wisely. And if you have any thoughts on Structure Therapeutics, other stock suggestions, or maybe you just want to share your own deep dive discoveries, be sure to leave a comment below. We always love hearing from you. Until next time, happy investing.